I'd like to maybe go first to James Madison. Of course, James Madison was the father of the Constitution, the specific form of government by the people that we now live under and that has proved to be so enduring. And he, perhaps more than any other founding father, thought through the details of the system by which government by the people might hope to endure. Of course, after July 4th, 1776, he was quite concerned and sometimes doubtful about whether it could work. He looked at the early experience in the state legislatures and the early Confederation and was alarmed at the degree to which people pursued their own narrow self-interests within this system of government by the people, and found that it really wasn't working very well because of that. And as he looked back over history, he realized that this problem of factions, as he referred to it, where people divide themselves up into narrow coalitions to pursue their own narrow self-interest, that had really been one of the major problems that government by the people had faced. And so he worked very hard to address that problem in the Constitution that he helped craft. And then, of course, he not only was the chief architect of our Constitution, but he was one of its chief public relations advocates. He, along with Alexander Hamilton and John Jay, through the Federalist Papers, did more than anybody else to persuade the nation that this was the form of government by the people that could endure. One of the most influential of the Federalist Papers is Federalist Paper number 10. He starts off that famous work with the following sentences. Among the numerous advantages promised by a well-constructed union, none deserve to be more accurately developed than its tendency to break and control the violence of faction. The friend of popular governments never finds himself so much alarmed for their character and fate as when he contemplates their propensity to this dangerous vice. He opens up Federalist number 10, telling us that this is one of the chief concerns he had in his mind as he crafted the Constitution. He went on to explain why he thought the problem of faction had been so difficult in governments by the people in the past. He says, as long as the reason of man continues fallible and he is at liberty to exercise it, different opinions will be formed. As long as the connection subsists between his reason and his self-love, his opinions and his passions will have a reciprocal influence on each other, and the former will be objects to which the latter will attach themselves. He recognized that we're all imperfect in our judgment, and that our judgment is influenced by what would turn out to be best for us. And because different things would be good for different members of our society, we form different opinions, and that breaks us into factions. He goes on to say, then, that the latent causes of faction are thus sown in the nature of man, and we see them everywhere brought into different degrees of activity according to the different circumstances of civil society. A zeal for different opinions concerning religion, concerning government, and many other points have in turn divided mankind into parties, inflamed them with mutual animosity, and rendered them much more disposed to vex and oppress each other than to cooperate for their common good. So, basis that, he established the constitutional system of checks and balances, of state governments along with a national government that would both be responsive to the people, in the hopes of making it difficult for any one faction to be able to gain enough influence to exert its will on others when that will was not in the broad interests of the people, not in the broad long-term interests of the people. As he watched his system of government unfold in the early years, he again was concerned that it was proving difficult, as it always had in popular governments, and in particular the system that he developed, he recognized had a particular problem that, because it was so difficult to move anything through the system of divided government and checks and balances, that the broad public could get discouraged and check out of the process and decide it wasn't worth their being involved. And as he went on later in his life, he continued to warn us that it was important for citizens to be informed and to be active, and that kind of informed, participatory public opinion was really the true safeguard of liberty and of the system of government by the people. So this was one of the main concerns that James Madison took to his grave about what might limit the success or lead to the failure of the system of government he worked so hard to found.